With next generation right around the corner, I thought it would be fun to go back and take a look at some old games that maybe should be revived for next generation. So for this week, I want to focus on the top 10 games that Microsoft should bring back for the Xbox Series X. They own several IP that has a ton of potential for modern gamers, and with their increased focus on first-party IP, there really is no better time to bring back some of these old, forgotten gems. Of course, we still want new IP as well, but even if they brought back just a few of these old games, that still makes a lot of fans happy. With that said though, I did choose IP that Microsoft owns, and of course this is only my opinion, but with a subject like this, I would love to hear what games you think Xbox should bring back for next generation, so let me know in the comments below. Anyways though, let's get right into the list. At number 10, I have Blue Dragon. Now this is an interesting title as Microsoft and Mistwalker partnered up to create this classic turn-based JRPG for the Xbox 360 and released it back in 2007. Even to this day, this game still looks fantastic thanks to its timeless art style worked on by Akira Toriyama, most well known for Dragon Ball. In fact, you can clearly see the resemblance to Dragon Ball and even Dragon Quest, and right there is why I think this game should return. Dragon Quest is an insanely popular game over in Japan, so much so that there is an urban myth that the Japanese government will no longer allow Dragon Quest games to release on a weekday because so many people would skip school or work to play a new Dragon Quest game the day it releases. That's not necessarily true, but it, however, is huge over in Japan. Now, head of Xbox Phil Spencer has been putting a lot of emphasis on Japan and improving over there, so to me, I think making a new Blue Dragon could be a really good start there. This could end up being Xbox's Dragon Quest. The main problem would be, who would they have work on this game? They would likely have to license out this game to a Japanese developer, and hey, if they could somehow get Mistwalker to work on this once again, that would be huge. If there is one developer that Xbox owns that you could choose a number of old IP from, that would be Rare. They own a ton of IP that should come back, including Cameo. Cameo was an action-adventure game for the Xbox 360 where you played as a fairy in a high fantasy world. The cool thing though was that this fairy could morph into different creatures, all with their own abilities. Each creature not only used these abilities to attack different foes, but there was a lot of puzzle elements to this game as well. I always kind of viewed Cameo as Xbox's Zelda, though both are very different, but truthfully, I think that Cameo is one of the most criminally overlooked and underrated games that I've ever played personally. This was a fantastic game for the Xbox 360 and had so much potential as a franchise. In fact, I think it's some of Rare's best work ever, which is saying a lot. The only unfortunate part about all this is that Rare in fact was at one point in time looking into making a sequel for Cameo, but it was sadly cancelled. There, however, has been plenty of concept art you can look at which was released on Rare Replay. Rare explains the sequel as having a much darker world, and Cameo all grown up has been touched by the darkness as well. I imagine it would have been an even more epic game than the original, with a more mature tone to it, and even though it was cancelled, I would still love to see Cameo return today for the Xbox Series X. Pillars of Eternity is probably the newest IP on this list, with Pillars of Eternity 2 releasing in 2018. However, the sequel really struggled when it came to its sales numbers, after the first game was a huge success both in terms of its sales as well as critically. And even though the second game had good reviews, people just did not buy into the sequel, and this really seemed to have surprised Obsidian Entertainment. The lead designer Josh Sawyer did put out a lengthy post on the possibility of a third game, and said with the low sales numbers, if they were to ever return to the Pillars of Eternity IP, they would likely have to re-examine the entire format of the franchise. The problem is, Obsidian seems to not know why exactly the second game struggled, and without knowing, it's hard for them to figure out how they could improve it. With that said though, I think that they could scale up this franchise in a big way. The world itself is very interesting, and by modernizing it, it could help the franchise bring in new players. They could keep it similar to what they've been doing already, but make it more like the upcoming Baldur's Gate 3 by Larian Studios. Baldur's Gate 3 really seems to modernize these old classic RPGs with turn-based combat, and even allows you to walk around in third-person view with the camera over your shoulders. I could see Pillars of Eternity doing something very similar to this and being successful. Viva Pinatas is one of those weird games that you just don't think is going to be good, but then you play it and realize it's not just good, but it's great. The entire game is all about creating an environment that adorable little pinatas would like to visit, and if they like the environment you built enough, then they will stay as a permanent resident. Though that doesn't necessarily mean it will always be peaceful, as some pinatas will absolutely murder others and eat their delicious candies, and there is all kinds of hurdles along the way. It's just a charming but addictive game. It almost reminds me of a mix between Pokemon and Animal Crossing. You have that monster catching ability without the battling, and then the aspect of making a better community. Rare just does not get enough credit for this game, but it truly is a phenomenal Xbox 360 game, and I think they could make an even better one for the Xbox Series X. Also, I think this game would work really well as a cross-play title for PC, and having it on Xbox Game Pass would immediately give it a big community. When CONKER released in 2001 for the Nintendo 64, it went on to become a cult classic. It may not have sold extraordinarily well, in part because it was a very mature rated title with some perverted humor, but had the artistic style that would attract children. It was just an odd game all around, but pretty much everybody who played CONKER's Bad Fur Day absolutely loved it. Not only was it hilarious and acts as a parody to popular cinema for the time, such as Matrix and Saving Private Ryan, but it was also a fun collectathon platformer with several other gameplay mechanics thrown in, such as third-person shooting. It truly does mix up the gameplay quite a bit with context-sensitive buttons, and fans have pretty much wanted a sequel ever since. Xbox fans did end up getting a remake for the original Xbox, CONKER Live and Reloaded, and also got a DLC add-on, CONKER's Big Reunion, but to this day we still have not got a full-length CONKER game that we truly deserve. Now the question is, has too much time passed to bring CONKER back for a new audience? And I really don't think so. I once heard this idea of CONKER coming back, but instead of being a parody to popular cinema, instead he could travel to different Xbox-related worlds. So in a new CONKER game, he could end up traveling to a Halo world, Gears of War, Hellblade, and so much more. It could end up being really funny, but truthfully, no matter how they decide to bring back CONKER, as long as it's treated as a premier title rather than DLC, fans will likely be extremely excited. If Blue Dragon could be Xbox's Dragon Quest, then Lost Odyssey could be Xbox's Final Fantasy. In fact, Lost Odyssey was created by none other than the father of Final Fantasy, Hironobu Sakaguchi. And one way to explain Lost Odyssey would be an HD Final Fantasy for the Xbox 360. They play very similar to the classic Final Fantasy games, and you can even see some inspiration from games like Final Fantasy VIII and how the gunblade works. Lost Odyssey, though, never got the love and attention it deserves because game critics at that time seemed to shun these type of games in belief that these type of games were archaic. Luckily though, as the years have gone by, more and more people have started to notice just how good this game actually was, and I've seen it make several all-time great JRPG lists, which I completely agree with. I do think that Lost Odyssey is an all-time great JRPG. It really is that good. It can be a clumsy game with its presentation, but it's a fantastic game, and if somehow Xbox could once again team up with Mistwalker, this could end up being a huge franchise for Xbox, and help out in Japan as well. We have seen Final Fantasy grow over the years, and how you can change each game both in terms of their story and gameplay style, and Lost Odyssey could do just that. It doesn't just have to be a turn-based JRPG, they could do an action RPG as well. The possibilities for a Lost Odyssey sequel are endless. You had to have known Fable had to pop up on here somewhere. Fable, without a doubt, is one of Xbox's pillar franchises that unfortunately has vanished over this generation. Back in the 2000s, we did have the privilege to get a Fable trilogy, but the Lionhead studio was sadly closed down this generation as Fable Legends got cancelled. This was a very heartbreaking moment for both Lionhead and Fable fans alike. This, however, has not stopped fans from salivating over a new Fable game from maybe a different studio. The question now, though, is who could develop it, and should Fable be a more gritty and darker RPG, or should it be more like the originals with that light-hearted fairy tale-like world? I'm more in favor with a complete reboot and a darker world myself, but I'd be happy with a new Fable no matter how it was designed as long as it's a good game. The good news here though is that from the sounds of it, Xbox is indeed working on a new Fable game. This has yet to be officially confirmed, but it sounds like Xbox's new studio Playground Games is in fact working on a new Fable game. Let's just hope that's true, but I will ask you, would you prefer a darker Fable or a more lighthearted one like the originals? To this day, Killer Instinct for the Xbox One is my all-time favorite fighting game. It launched with just 6 characters side by side with the Xbox One, and as the first season rolled by, we ended up with just 8 characters. Killer Instinct was heavily criticized for the amount of characters at launch, but it was always very obvious that this was a fantastic fighting game with fun mechanics and arguably the best netcode in any fighting game ever. Luckily, we did get 3+ seasons of Killer Instinct from 2 different developers, which brought the total amount of characters up to 29. Each character was brilliantly crafted and were drastically different from one another. That right there to me was what made this game just so special. The characters were highly interesting, each with their own unique playstyle. I mean, how many games can have a toad fighting an alien, or a vampire, a werewolf, a mummy, or a dinosaur wearing a cheerleading outfit? The characters are just insane in Killer Instinct, and I absolutely love it. In fact, I think the fighting mechanics of this game are also the best. I would take this game over Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat any day of the week. And with that said, this game does need to return for the Xbox Series X. Now hopefully it would launch with more than just 6 characters, but this absolutely should not be a one-time thing for Xbox. It was a successful game for Xbox One confirmed by Phil Spencer himself, and this would be a system seller for fighting game fans like myself. Every single year there is that one rumor that Banjo-Kazooie is finally going to return, and I try not to fall for it every time. But I am a big Banjo-Kazooie fan, so it's hard not to hope for the best. Here I am though once again asking Xbox, please let's make Banjo-Kazooie happen for the Xbox Series X. I have never seen a franchise that would make more sense for next generation. In fact, Xbox does not even need to make a new Banjo game. Instead, they could simply just license this game out and do a remake for the original 2 Banjo games. We have seen this with Crash Bandicoot and the Insane Trilogy, as well as Spyro Reignited, both of which were insanely successful. So why not do the same thing with Banjo-Kazooie? And if enough people buy it, then they could go out and finally make that Banjo-Kazooie 3. Hey, we have been seeing a ton of remakes here recently. You have the Final Fantasy VII Remake, Resident Evil, Shadow of the Colossus, Halo 2, among several other games. And something else about making this type of game, Xbox now has Xbox Game Pass, which does minimize risks taken. So come on Xbox, let's make this happen. We have waited far too long for a new Banjo game. If there is one single franchise that I think makes sense for modern gamers, it's Perfect Dark. Perfect Dark released back in 2000 as a groundbreaking first-person shooter after Rare's big hit GoldenEye. It was a phenomenal game back then, and I actually do think it aged really well. I played it on Rare Replay here recently, and its mechanics are really interesting and doesn't play like anything else on a modern machine. But that's the thing about Perfect Dark. This is a game that could come back with a completely new look. In fact, I don't even think it needs to necessarily come back as a first-person shooter. Instead though, Joanna Dark could come back as Xbox's Tomb Raider or Uncharted in a third-person action-adventure game, but with some heavy stealth-based mechanics thrown in. This would allow for a very cinematic game, something that modern gamers love, and truthfully, ever since Metal Gear Solid and Splinter Cell has went away, we really don't get enough big AAA stealth-based games. That is where Perfect Dark could truly shine, and that's the thing. There is a rumor that Xbox may be developing a new Perfect Dark with their new studio, The Initiative, headed by none other than Daryl Gallagher. He did help reboot the Tomb Raider franchise, so could he once again reboot another franchise with success, such as Perfect Dark? Or are those rumors completely false? I guess time will tell, but I still do believe Perfect Dark would be the perfect reboot for the Xbox Series X. Anyways though, that's it for this video, but if I missed any game that you think should return for the Xbox Series X, let me know in the comments below. With that said though, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Peace out.